Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring you another Table Time, where we talk about some of 40K's confusing aspects and help bring light to this for newer to intermediate players so everyone is able to feel comfortable with how some of these abilities work and how some of these rule interactions have. For many of us playing the game for many, many years, we've gotten used to how Games Workshop talks and presents rules. So we've been able to weed through and weasel through and understand what these things, as some would call rule lawyering the game, down to a T. So today we're going to talk about the command phase and a specific timing that doesn't only go for the command phase. It can also go for other phases into the game where these similar phrases are used. Beginning of, during, and at the end of. This is something that we see a lot during the command phase, for command phase abilities and when they're going to activate and how they work. And we'll use a quick description of this as well with a Necron ability that does something similar so that you guys, when you're looking at your lists, your armies, and your codexes and see similar things, you can look for these specific timings and understand how they interact before going to a game, before playing with your buddies, or before just composing a list entirely. All right, guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Turn on the bell for notifications. Get notified on all the content we bring you here on the channel. And with that being said, let's jump over and start talking about these specific verbiage in Warhammer 40K. So we have the command phase now. The command phase is not something that has existed within all of 40K. And it's actually a good phase. Those who play Magic the Gathering as well will know the upkeep step. It's similar to that. It is a step where we can funnel abilities to be utilized. Prior editions, it was very difficult to time and state when something would occur. Some of these abilities would end up getting stacked all right at the beginning of your turn and could make things very complicated and convoluted. Now with the command phase, we have a direct location for when a lot of these abilities are addressed. Most of these abilities are commander effects that involve dishing out ability, gaining command points, and as well scoring primary objectives. Those are going to be some of the important ones that we talk about here. There are some army-wide abilities that also trigger during the command phase as well to keep in mind, as the Necrons are going to be one that we're going to talk about with that. So, how does this work? How did this translate? How does all this stuff layer on top of it? So first we have to understand the verbiage of the game. Beginning of, during, and end of are the most common sequences that we will see for an ability. If an ability states at the beginning of your command phase, and we're using the command phase here for simplicity purposes, if an ability states beginning of your command phase, that means it needs to be done before any other abilities in that phase. Now, where some of this can be confusing is it says, well, my ability says beginning of command phase, and your ability says beginning of command phase, so which one really goes first? Answer, controlling player. It is in the advanced rules section. The controlling player chooses when all abilities will resolve. All abilities. So this means that if you have two abilities that resolve at the beginning of the command phase, you can select which order those resolve in. This matters with the ability that we'll talk about later on for the end of as well. So when you're looking at an ability and you see that you have two abilities that resolve both at the beginning of the command phase, you know that if you need one ability first, you could do that one first before stacking the second ability to be able to utilize buffs. Let's say if you had an ability that would give +1 to hit, and then another ability that would relocate a unit to another spot of the field, if both of those resolve at the beginning of the command phase, then you could stack them to give the unit +1 to hit, and then relocate it, moving the unit with a higher buff. However, now we move into the next thing, during the command phase. If you had an ability that said during your command phase, you can give your unit +1 to hit, but your ability to relocate a unit was required at the beginning of the command phase, now you would not be able to do that. So anything that states during the command phase will occur in the limbo between beginning and end. So the reason that this exists is because of this factor to be able to stack these abilities, because some other abilities may function poorly for this effect. So, and where this comes into as well is some of the stuff with Battle Shock. Battle Shock usually will occur before any of these abilities can happen, such as Reanimation Protocol, which is the ability we're going to be talking about here in a minute. So you need to make sure that these abilities are all resolved during your command phase, but not before any of the beginning effects. And once you move to the end effects, once you do an end effect, you cannot go back and do a during effect. So that's very critical to make sure that you have all of those abilities functioning during that time. So once your beginning effects are done and you immediately move to a during, you can't go back. Once you do a during, you cannot go, you do an end, you cannot go back to the during effects. That's an important effect to remember. Some of this stuff is not necessarily as much verbiage as much as it is a location of time and beginning, middle, and end. So once again, in the during factor, you as the controlling player, the player whose turn it is, can once again pick the order in which these resolve and can stack abilities accordingly. This will now also translate over into the end effect, where at the end of command phase, abilities that trigger at the end of the command phase must be done last, must be done after everything else has been done. So if you have any more beginning or during command phase effects, once you do an end of command phase effect, you cannot go back and do any of those other ones, and they must stack in those order. Once again, any end of command phase effects can be stacked in your choice if you are the controlling player. If it is not your turn, your opponent then has the priority to stack these abilities in the way that they choose. This is a very common, simple, I want to say simple, excuse me, not simple. This is a very common system for a lot of card games where we're stacking the cards on top of each other. And if you think about it in that fashion of each one of your abilities that you have during the command phase is a card. And when you go into the command phase and you say, okay, I'm going to pick up these cards that are all stating beginning of command phase. These are the ones I have to play. Your opponent goes, okay, I have one card to play that is also in the beginning of your command phase. Well, then you pick up all those and you pick which order they're going to be resolved in, and you just read them one at a time. And that's how they resolve. That's basically a simplistic process. Now, some may ask, why? Why have this much complexity into it? What possible reward could this reap? That's what we're going to show you next with the Necron Reanimation ability and how this can stack based on when these abilities resolve. Okay, so for simplicity purposes, here we go. We have a squad of Skorpekh Destroyers, and they are missing one model from them at this time. All right, here we go. So we have a squad of Skorpekh Destroyers, and this squad is missing one model at this time. It is now our turn, and we enter the command phase. So when we enter the command phase, the first thing that we have to do is our command, which allows us to gain one command point. Nice. All right, so we gained one command point. Now, at this time, we have no other command phase effects yet. So we're going to move on to the Battle Shock portion of the show. Now, assuming that this squad has only lost one model, we would not need to test a Battle Shock. But in this scenario, we're going to assume that this is a six-man squad. So this squad is going to need to test Battle Shock now. So they will roll 2 dice. If they meet or beat their leadership value, they are fine. They are not Battle Shocked. However, if they are Battle Shocked, then I cannot target them with stratagems, and their objective control value becomes 0, which would make this next maneuver completely and totally useless. So we're going to, bam, we rolled and we passed their Battle Shock. Awesome. So now this unit is not Battle Shocked, and they're missing guys. So now we roll Reanimation. Well, these guys have no wounds on them at all. So they're fresh. So once we roll our Reanimation, we're going to get a full model back. Now, here is where the trigger happens. So right at this point during the command phase is where we're going to score our primaries. But primary scoring happens at the end of command phase. What also happens at the end of the command phase? A reanimation protocol. So us as the controlling player, we're going to use our reanimation first, which means we are able to reanimate a model with incoherency. And since we passed our battle shock test, our objective control value is still a 2 for these guys, and we are able to take that objective marker, and now when we move to the command phase, we now control that objective and score the primary points. While some may say, oh, well, wouldn't you just leave your guys on the objective? This is a tricky thing to do with Necron Warriors to be able to steal objectives. Now, with this sequencing as well, we're gonna do this one more time, but just a little more sequencing. So we begin the command phase, and we're gonna gain 1 command point. Okay, we definitely want this objective marker with all of our heart. So in order to do so, because we are down to just the 2 models from this 6-man squad, because we have that command point, we're going to spend it during the battle shock, because we did gain this command point during our command step of our command phase before testing battle shock. So, and there was an FAQ on it and change in errata that you can't roll the dice first. It used to be roll and then you'd spend the command point to pass a failed battle shock. Now you must do it before you roll the dice to guarantee you automatically pass it. So we're going to spend our command point. Now we don't need to roll the dice for the battle shock at all. And instead we just move right to reanimations and put our Necron score pack in there and take the objective marker. Reason we are allowed to do this is, once again, we control the order that they resolve. So we're going to choose to score our primary after all reanimation protocol results have been completed. So that's it, guys. That's one of many ways that in this game you can stack abilities to turn a mediocre ability into a very powerful, very crippling effect that can score you points deep into the game or just put you in a better tactical position. So I ask, after watching this, hopefully you guys can look back at some of your lists, some of your codexes, indexes, and everything else, and you might see a light shine through on an ability that you may have glanced over before because of not realizing how powerful it could be in interacting with the timing of the game. Hopefully this video helped you out. We're going to be trying to do many, many more of these videos because it always breaks my heart when when people go to tournaments for the first time, RTTs, GTs, whatever it may be, and there's simple little things that they feel like were a gotcha and they feel like cost them and lost them the game in some of these silly little situations. And I wish to hopefully help the community to understand these rules and these interactions. Again, you can't expect that everybody knows everything in the game. It's such an advanced and such a complicated game. But hopefully some of this stuff, because stealing an objective someone with a squad of Necron Warriors with that ability may feel kind of rough, feel kind of dirty, but it is definitely a very powerful tool that the Necrons can use. And at least if you know about it ahead of time, it doesn't feel as dirty because at least you knew it could exist. And that's my goal here, is to try to present some of this stuff, hopefully, to help the community and grow in these ways. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Tune in next time. We'll leave some comments down below. If there's certain aspects of the game that you wish to have more highlights spent on, maybe see some models on the table, let me know. I definitely would appreciate some feedback on different concepts in 40K that we can talk about here on the channel. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching.